If you didn't enjoy it, you have yourselves to blame because it was a potluck. So, yay, Jeremy. Kids, we have some activities for you if you want to join Mrs. Jobst right here. Not you, Sandy. But you can either stay in here and listen to us talk about boring things. Kids only. Adults, you have to stay. No. If you are over the age of 16,
see you, Mike.
You have to stay in here. You're required to stay in here. 16. 16. If I said 60, still about half the room would have to stay. So that's not too bad. Well, they didn't hear me.
Wow.
I know.
They're going to get up and leave.
They're going to get up and leave when they finally figured out what I said. I want to read a passage from 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting men's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you, on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. As you know, this was we had wanted to do this in the park today for a couple of reasons. Number one, it'd be fun to get out into the park and enjoy nature and be together out there. But it's also a little bit more than that. This is actually going to be part of what we do as a combined effort of the two churches, Radiant and Activate, and Grace as well, to some degree. We are going to be doing an event in the park on the first Sunday of the month. And we're still kind of working on kind of what that's going to be called exactly, but it'll be called something very creative, probably, like Sundays in the Park. That's
Sundays in the park with food.
And yeah, we're trying to keep it tight, but Sundays in the Park seems to be the working name. But the idea behind it is that we want to get together and do something very similar to what we did today, where we get together, we share a meal. But we do it out in public where we can invite other people to join us. We also want to create, as Jeremy likes to say, create value for those people who come to the park on a regular basis. And many families go to the park on Sunday morning. And both churches have talked about this a lot. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, talking about how we need to be out in public, how people aren't coming into churches. We need to be going out to them. But the big question behind this, and for a lot of people, and I know for some of you here today even, it might be a struggle to think about, well, what does that look like? Are we doing a worship service in the park? And that's not really the idea behind it. The idea is that we want to be the church in the park and not just do church in the park. And what I mean by that is there's really three things that I've kind of thought about in this. And of what it means to be the church in the park. Number one, we are the church in the park, right? That's where we meet. Now, I know that's not Radiant's thing. We don't meet in the park regularly, but Activate does. But we are one church. Even if we have different names, we do different expressions. So we have this idea of wanting to sort of plant a church in the park there. So we're in the park, but we're also of the park, meaning we want the people of the park to feel like they are a part of our community. And finally, we are for the park, that we want to be, we want those in the park to thrive. We want them, as we just read from Corinthians, we want them to be reconciled to God, that we have been created and called to be his ambassadors, to go out and to invite others in. And I think it's really important that we make this delineation between being a church in the park, that's of the park, that's for the park, as opposed to just doing church in the park. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's one of the things that I've been processing, because we've been a church in the park for, I don't know how long, 2 years now? 2.5 years? I don't know, maybe Randy knows. Some people keep track of dates. I don't. It was my daughter's birthday yesterday, and I got that right. So, because she helped me get a bigger tax return one year.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
That's really
just
good planning.
Right in on the
you get
right
the
in
whole
on the
year
cusp, the
with
whole
no
year.
real cost.
Yeah, but then it goes away when she's 8. It's gone.
True.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, we've been a church in the park for a while. One of the things that we've been doing is trying to build inroads with the people who are in the park. They see us. We put some flags up. They walk by. We have a friend, John, who's come to us through the park, and he asked one Sunday morning. He asked somebody else, "Who's that group over there?" And they're like, "Oh, it's a church. I think they meet here each week." "Well, can anybody go?" "Yeah, okay." So he came over and he sat down with us, and he's come to be part of our community. And when we were in the school, I was always wondering what would it be like if the church were outside the walls, right? Because we were serving outside the walls when we would do our serve days, but everything we did a church service in a school building, and I always wondered what would it be like to be in the park. And COVID forced us into the park because I wasn't. So COVID is my fault. I'm going to take responsibility for that. God told me we should be out of the building and go into the park. And it's, it's just like Jonah. It's like, nope, you're going to have to go in the park. I'm going to have to. That's not really why. But anyhow, we're in the park, right? But we're still doing a church service in the park, which is still, it's odd to people who are there just taking their grandchildren. And it's really not a place where there's not a clear avenue for them to join us. Even though we'll put up a sign that says you're welcome and we could have some extra chairs, what we do there is not approachable. Let's put it that way. It's not evidently approachable. So the thing that I had been thinking, and I came into Joel, I don't know, a month ago or so, and I said, look, 2021 or 2023, we're changing things up. I lost 2 years with COVID. I'm still in 2021. I just canceled those 2 years. Yeah, it's gone. 2023, we're going to do something different. We're going to become the church of the park, in the park. But it's going to have to look different because we have to be approachable. And I was like, well, what would it look like if we were to be approachable? Well, I mean, if we put signs up inviting people. If I were to invite you to my daughter's birthday park in the park, you would probably get an invite. You would know the location. There would be banners and signage that says, hey, we're doing the thing here, and you're welcome to be a part of us. Enjoy the food, enjoy the company, enjoy the fellowship, enjoy all that we have to offer as a community. That's what we're going to do in the park. Because we have people that come and they see our flags and they see what we're doing, but they don't feel welcomed into that. Right. So we're going to begin welcoming them. We're going to be going around in the park and giving invitations. And our signage is going to say, you're invited. And we're going to have tables available for them to sit at, much like you guys. This place was prepared for you guys this morning to come in here and enjoy community and enjoy food. And I said, well, what would we do? Well, what did Jesus do? Well, he broke bread a lot, right? He ate. How many of you guys like eating? We're Americans, right? We're professionals at it.
At least 3 times a day.
Yes, at least 3 times a day with at least 3 snacks in between. And if you stay up late, you need extra snacks because it's going to be a long time till you wake up in the morning. And I said, we're going to do food. And we're not just going to do cheap food. We're going to do good food. People that they'd want to stop for it. So what are we going to do? Pulled pork sandwiches and things like that. And, have inflatable games. And, well, how do you get, Andy Stanley says something big. He says, you catch big fish with small fish. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to do a lot of things that excite children, to bring children in. We're going to do rockets and inflatable games and crafts and things that they would want to come and stick around for a while. Why? Because this expression of church, much like Jesus would sit around and just have conversations with people around food for hours, and they would get to know him and he would get to know them. So what we're looking at doing is being the church of the park and making it evident and clear that all are welcome. And we're not going to do the strange things that you might have had happen in your past, or it might not seem like it's appropriate out in the park, in public. Essentially, we're bringing the gospel to people in the park.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I know a lot of churches that did have to obviously change things up during COVID. And I think it was a missed opportunity in many ways because what we tried to do was just to recapture what we did inside the building, outside the building. And I was at a pastor's conference actually it's about 2 years ago for our association, and I was talking to this one pastor, and he was very excited to tell me about his church that meets in a bar. And he was very proud, like, yeah, we're relevant, we're cool because we meet in a bar. And I was like, cool. What does that look like? What does it look like to be a church that meets in a bar? And he's like, well, the owner knows us, and he lets us come in on Sunday night, and we set up our instruments, and we do a worship set, and then I preach, and then we take an offering, and then we sing another song, and then we're done. It's like, so you just do the exact same thing that I do, but you're doing it in a bar. Yeah. And it's like, I get it, and I think that's a step in the right direction,
Right.
but it's like, Jeremy and I talked about this last week. It's like we have this proclivity sometimes as Christians to church everything up, right? Like we take something that's
It's
good.
got to feel like church,
Right,
or
if-
it wasn't church,
and
right?
when we really boil that down, for example, let me ask you a question. Is today a worship service? Okay, why? We're gathered under Christ. Very good. You guys are well taught. We did a good job. I was really expecting a different answer. No, because we have food. No, that's an important one, by the way. But one of the issues I think that probably the main issue I see is that a lot of times it's like if we don't have music, we don't have singing, then it's not worship. And granted, there's a lot of different things. And at some point, we'll do a talk, probably a podcast or something, on what worship truly means. Because worship is just ascribing worth to God. It's just showing that reverence. And we worship in all facets of our life. A gathered worship service for Christians in most parts of the world looks very similar. You have some singing, you have a message, and maybe an offering, maybe communion, things like that. But that's just a very small sliver of what worship is. And I think what we're trying to capture here is not just a broader sense of worship, but a broader sense of what it means to be the church. Because I told Jeremy, I'm very excited about this little saying that I came up with yesterday. We've made two mistakes, I think. Number one is that we've equated church with worship, and we've equated worship with singing. True, thank you, Crystal. I'm so glad you said that. We equate church with worship. That church only happens when we do worship. And then we say, then we have to define what worship is. And we define worship by it's when we sing together. Have you ever done, we tried this in my other church, is we wanted our small groups to have a time of worship. So guess what we made them do? Sing a cappella, which was horrible. Nobody liked it.
Not
And
that
it
you
wasn't
guys
any
don't
good.
have amazing
No,
voices.
you don't.
But people like me have to be in those groups
it
too.
was awkward, and it's like, why are we doing this? Because that's like the only thing we can come up with worship. But worship is so much more. But it's more than just worship. When we talk about the church, again, we talk about, there's other things that the church does. I think there's a minimum that we talk about of worship, of community, and mission. And when we're doing all three of those things together, that's really what it means to be the church. So coming back to this idea of the park, it's not going to be a worship service in the park where we come, like we've done before, and I'm not saying those things are bad, okay? I'm just saying that those in and of themselves do not accomplish the whole facet of what it means to be the church.
Well, it goes back to what you, I'm going to give you credit again.
Oh.
What you said is that the entry point for people on the outside shouldn't be this gathering.
Right.
We appreciate this gathering as a result. We know that we do because we're part of these types of gatherings, right? We give our lives and we pursue being in a community environment like this with other people who value singing and the teaching of the word and prayer and communion and those types of things. However, there are people out there that we are commanded, not asked to. We were voluntold. We were voluntold to reach those people, and they don't value the same things that we value yet. And what Joel said, and I think this was very profound, I love it. He said that the church gathering, this gathering, is not the starting point, but maybe potentially an ending point. Not an ending point, it's a later point for them. So what is which begs the question, right? What does the starting point look like? And that's the kind of things that rack this brain of mine. Like, how do we put the starting point? Where is the on-ramp to Christianity? Where is the first step towards meeting Jesus? And that's what we're trying to experience, and we're trying to put flesh on the bones here with what we're going to be doing in the park.
Yeah. And so when we look at it and say, well, what exactly are we going to do? As Jeremy said, we're going to have food, because food is what connects people. And again, going back to the Gospels, it's food always. And so we need to do more of this because as you experienced even today, when you have the food, you're sitting at your table, you're just having conversations. That's what we're going to do. But instead of just doing it for ourselves, it's going to be to invite others in. I know several churches that are doing a breakfast where they cook, their small groups take turns cooking breakfast for their congregation, on their first Sunday of the month. And it's a great idea. I love it. It's awesome. And I'm going to go visit those churches while you guys are in the park. And then I'll come join you in the park later for second breakfast. I'm a hobbit. But the problem is that they do it for themselves. Again, we've talked about this, and we've talked about it Radiant. I know Activate talks about it too. We do so many of these things for ourselves. It's like we can just do these same things and just invite others in because people are attracted to that. I mean, first of all, you might not think that people are like, well, why? Who would want to come join us? Well, there are people that are literally, that's why they're out there. They're there to meet people. They're looking for community. Everybody's thirsting for it. And even people like me that don't like I don't like getting stuck. When you go, has anybody been on a cruise? I know some of you guys like to cruise here. Do you do the dinners? Remember in the old days you had the dinners where you were like assigned a time and a table, and then you had dinner with strangers and stuff? I hated that. Like I went on a couple cruises and it's like they have open seating now, which I like because it's like, I get to pick and choose like where I'm sitting with whom and things. But what's funny is I have a couple here from Radiant that do cruises all the time, and they have met like lifelong friends. Actually, the Kidders, I think you guys have talked about this. You guys have friends that you have met, and it's because you're sitting at this table and you start to share stories. You start to talk about your lives. And that's all this is. We just invite people in to hear their stories, as Jeremy likes to say, to invite them into our stream, right? It's like, this is what we're doing. And a worship service is probably not the next step for them. It's going to be things like, hey, could you give us a hand? Could you serve alongside of us as we do this? Can you join us in this next serve event we've got with the city of Huntington Beach? Through Serve City. There's lots of different ways that we can invite other people into the stream because that's what discipleship is. I had this, I think we talked about this recently and it didn't even occur to me until recently that, when was that moment that like Peter became a disciple of Jesus? He was fishing. Okay, so that's the story. He's fishing. Jesus says, come follow me. And he leaves everything and follows Jesus. So if that's the moment he's a disciple, which is probably true because it means that he's a follower of Jesus, what did he know about Jesus? Very little. Very little. He might have seen a miracle or something. Did he know where Jesus was going? Did he know what Jesus was up to? Did he know the grand plan? No. He just knew enough like, this guy seems interesting. I'm going to follow him. See where it takes me. And I think we've kind of gotten it backwards with discipleship in the church. We think of discipleship as, when you've got your act together and you make this decision to follow Jesus, then you come and you can do the church stuff. And it's like, no, you learn about Jesus as you go. And that's what this is. It's inviting. It's the starting point. Maybe we'll call it starting point.
Hey, you're great at names.
So anyway, you bring people in, you invite them in, and then you see where it takes you. And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to be a follower of Jesus. It's not, and we don't devalue those people. We still are for those people. They're still a part of who we are.
Well, it's because we don't know when the Holy Spirit of God is going to open the eyes and touch the heart of a human being. But if we can create a place for them to belong before they believe, then it's God's work to do the work that we've been trying to do for so long, right? Is it not? I mean, it's true. Yeah. All we have to do is be friendly to people and then invite them into our stream of the godly, goodly things we're doing. And then they become like us over time, just as the apostles became like Christ over a period of time of watching him do what he did, observing, asking questions, why. We're probably going to get a lot of why questions. Or we might be in a lot of those conversations when people are like, hey, I noticed that you guys do this. Why is it that you do that? Oh, I'm glad you asked. At Royal Family Kids Camp, we call those teachable moments, right? We do life with these kids over the course of the week. And they start to see how we treat other people, how, in their life they come from People don't treat people very nice. But then they're with us and we're, hey, could you please pass this? And man, you're awesome at that. And they go, how come you guys are so like encouraging of each other? Well, let me tell you why. And they ask these questions, and this is the opportunity that we have with real people in our real city in the park. Why are we doing it in the park? Because that's where people are. You could go to a bar, you could go to other places, but people spend time doing essentially nothing, hanging out in a park.
And it's where Activate has already kind of planted. Right?
Yeah,
You've already been
we've
doing
just decided
it
to
for
stay
a couple
there.
of
We've been
years.
chumming the waters,
Yeah.
as it were, right?
Yeah.
We've been giving out cookies and snacks, and we've done an event there. And there are people who have come up to me and said, "Hey, you guys did that thing. Are you going to do that again?" And there's other people on my phone, like I told them, I looked their name up, Nick and Monique. Nick and Monique couldn't make it to our first event we did, but they're like, if you ever do this again, our kids would love this. Will you text us? Give them your phone number. Why? Because I think they can come along in our stream.
Yeah.
I think they'd come 6 times out of the next year. And I think they might come to a serve event that we do. And I think they might become friends of mine and Janie's. And I think they might meet Jesus along the way.
Yeah. And I think, again, just being in the same place regularly, showing up regularly, because it takes time and intentionality to build these relationships. They see it the first time, they go, what are they doing? And so I don't have high expectations. I don't have any expectations. Mm-hmm. It's just like, we're just going to do it and see what happens. We try it, and I think over time what you'll see is that people will start to filter in. And even now, I know Jeremy's told me stories of people that literally just wandering by and saying, like you mentioned John, and was it Greg, or what's the other guy's name? The engineer.
Had a few people that have
They just kind of came by with his
we
dog
met John.
a couple weeks
we
ago.
met both Johns in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a way, again, people walking by saying, what's going on here? And I think that's why being in public is so important. But there's more to this than just doing this for the park. There is a bigger idea here, because I know for some of you, you might think, well, I don't live in Huntington Beach, or this is an Activate thing, not really a Radiant thing, or whatever. But this is really a model for all of us on what it means to be the church. And I think it's also a model for what church growth and church planting will look like going forward. And this is not like a unique thing to us. This is not something we just invented. These are things that people have been talking about for a few decades, but very few churches actually do, because we kind of just go back to what's familiar, to what we know. But this is really an idea of, as you see it, you think about, wow, you know what? I could do this in my own setting. We could do this at Knott's Berry Farm. We can do it we could do this at Leisure World.
I could do this in my
we could do this in my neighborhood, right? Or our workplace, wherever. It's really a kind of a new way of planning churches, because these are the things that are reproducible. It's the stuff where we're all participating. These are the things, again, that I think God has called us to be a part of, that we're all called to do. Not just professionals, not just church planners or pastors or whatever. It's something we all do as ambassadors of Christ.
I'll share a quick story with you. Dear friends of my family are Louie and Lisa. I don't know that you guys have met them at all. They've lived here for decades, and we met them back in 2000, 90-something, 97, 98, 96, I don't know, around the time I graduated high school. And they came to the church, right? But they didn't experience Jesus and the fullness of Jesus in the church services that we had. They got tidbits, but they did life with my family for decades. We went camping together. I have Yosemite pictures. We did lunch after service. They would stick around when we did night service too. We'd go to lunch, and then they'd come to the house with my mom and dad, and we'd hang out for the afternoon and talk all kinds of things and become bonded together. And they would learn more about Christ and what it meant to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And we'd go to church again, and we just did things together. And we served Royal Family Kids Camp together, and we did all these things. And they're some of the dearest people to my family in the whole world. They're probably our closest family that's not our family, as well as the people up north in Washington. But this is how God brings people together, and they didn't know Jesus really before that. They met Jesus while we were driving along, and while we were fishing, and while we were hiking and setting up camp and telling a joke and cooking food together and all of these things. And all of these opportunities in the park are opportunities for us. Look, I don't want you guys to be the ones that are serving. I just want you to find somebody who will serve alongside you. I can't wait until we get some of these people who come to I know it's going to happen. We're going to meet people in the park, Joel, and they're going to be like, this is really cool. You guys are doing this again next month? Yeah. Yeah, could I help out next month? Do you guys need me to do anything? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do need you to do something. Yeah. What? I don't know. Tell us. We'll figure it out. We'll do more.
Yeah, what do you like
right?
to do?
What do you like to do? Do you like to cook?
No.
Do you like
Make
children? Do you like crafts? Do you like, what do you like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I
Get
think
them invested in the kingdom before they know they're invested in the kingdom.
Right. Right. Well, I know this is a lot to process and might be overwhelming. It might be confusing. You might have
They're
questions.
smart. They got this already.
Okay, I know. Well, you've been well taught, so at least Activate has been. But there's a few things that we're going to ask you to do. Number one, trust us. Bear with us.
That's it.
Right? And join us. And there's a couple of things specifically what this is going to look like. So number one, we want you to participate on that first Sunday of the month. And I don't know if I should give you an out here, but I'm going to, just in fairness. I mentioned that Grace is going to be participating with us as well. But Grace is not going to jettison their worship service. They do a 9:30 service. For some of you, probably more particularly Radiant people, if you're more comfortable, like, well, I feel like I need to go to church still. Cool. Go to church at Grace at 9:30. That's fine. Because the stuff at the parks, we're going to be setting up. We're going to be getting things ready for a long time. We're going to have to be there by, 9:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. And then the event,
see.
the lunch or something will start probably a little bit later. You'll have time, essentially. You could go to Grace and then go to the park if you wanted. If you really feel like I have to go to a building and do a certain set of rituals, fine, great. You're more welcome to do that. I think it's nice to have that option for folks. But what we're really asking you to do is show up at the park. And when you show up, it's not just like, I'm going to be the guy, passing out the donuts behind the table and not talking to people. No, part of it is you're going to be sitting down, having lunch, eating with other people. You don't do this you don't have to do it by yourself, right? But think about like when you came in this morning. We all kind of, you scouted out your seats. You found somebody maybe and you feel more comfortable with. That's fine. But we want to leave open spots for people to come join you. So maybe there's 2 or 3 of you at a table, and there's 2 or 3 open spaces. So we don't all crowd into the same table, right? You come in, and that's part of your participation. I mean, think about this. We're asking you to show up at the park and eat free food, good food, and just do it with some other people. Like, that's a pretty easy ask in my book. Like, you had me at food. So, whatever you want after, that's fine. We're also going to be doing something called a learning lab. And it's going to be on the 4th Wednesday of the month. And in that learning lab, we're going to learn how to do some of these things. Because some of these things aren't as natural. I mean, I've complimented Jeremy for his ability to, strike up conversations. And yes, obviously, his rugged good looks. But, and remember things about people and listen, being a good listener. Even as a good talker, he's a good listener. And it's like, sometimes that's not natural to many of us, people like me. So there's some skills we want you to, we're going to give you, and we want you to practice. And that's where the learning lab's going to be. And it's not just going to be this thing where it's a lecture and it's we're talking at you for way too long. It's going to be, here's a skill. You're going to practice it. You're going to develop it. We're going to start sharing stories. We're going to have a feedback loop coming back from the park. Tell us what happened. Talk about the conversations you had. What did you learn about this person? What did you learn about the people you talked to? And then we can talk about following up. Another thing we've talked about in this too is, and this was getting a little ahead of ourselves, but it's going to be about networking. You find out something about somebody and you go, you know who they should talk to? I need to introduce that person to so-and-so. You find out something interesting about them. Oh, they're really into gaming. Let me go introduce them to Marcus. And so you kind of help find these connections with people as you get to know them. So I think, again, this is not, some of it can be a little threatening. It can feel like I'm not prepared. What do I say when somebody asks me, what are we doing here? That's what the Learning Lab is for. It's an opportunity for us to come together to learn from one another. And some of you are really good at this. Where's Melissa? She around here? I saw her earlier.
She's getting her hair played with.
Yeah. I know, like Melissa's got some stories, like the way, and it's like, I just want to pick Melissa's brain and say, okay, how did that conversation begin? And how did you do this? And what brought you to this? And that's a way for us to learn, and we can learn from one another. So that's it. You're coming on Sundays, first Sundays of the month, and you're coming on the fourth Wednesdays. Done.
Well,
I need a verbal yes from all of you.
or a passive nod,
Thank
an eye glance. If you made eye contact,
No, if you're here, you're
in.
already signed up. So I don't know if I didn't tell you that.
Well, another part of being at Learning Lab, another part of being around and talking with people is so that you can be a good connector. Because when you start to know a little bit about everybody in this room, just take a moment to look around, look at all the faces and people that you don't know much about, right? There are several people in there like, I know a little bit. I talked about owls a little bit. I know they live close to me, and but I know a little bit about all of you. I know some of what makes some of you tick. And when I meet somebody, if they don't connect with me necessarily, I don't want us to lose them. I want to be able to say, you know who you would connect with? Let me introduce you to my friend. And it might be somebody who doesn't even involve themselves with our church. We could just say, hey, are you going to be here next month? I'm going to bring my friend Kennedy, and she's going to come because she loves what you do. She would love to talk to you about that, and she probably has some opportunities for you to get connected. Now, not only have I met somebody new in the park, but now I'm bringing somebody who's in my life who doesn't come to church potentially to be part of this thing that we're launching in the church, in the park, I mean.
So does this make sense? I mean, I know you might have some questions. Yeah, go for it.
Out there that's just not about one thing, but you guys do it all. You guys make people feel like they're out of their comfort zone to get into it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Connor.
Yeah. 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 Thank you.
That's Kelly's son, Connor.
That's great. Nice to meet you. Are there other questions or? Yeah, Melissa? Low bar. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Yeah. And I know a lot of you folks, you probably have similar stories of just feeling a place of connection, of community. And, that doesn't happen in a large church. I mean, again, and I'm not going to badmouth other churches or anything necessarily right now. Except for Joel Osteen. I always have to bag on him. But, the problem is that, again, we've kind of bought into this celebrity church culture of, bigger is better, and let's have, all these thousands of people coming to your church service, and, you got the cool pastor and the young worship leader and all those other things, and it's like, none of that is the church, We do. Yes, I know. Thank you. But
well, Radiant does.
Yeah, but it's like no. The idea is that it's designed to be done in a smaller group. I mean, both of our churches are small churches, but we're actually like the ideal size because you can know everybody, and that's and let's be honest. Some people don't want to be known. That's a scary thing. They have to be vulnerable, and there's a process to that. But,
and yet. There are people that I've met who don't want to be known, who really, really want to be known.
Absolutely.
It's just they've been hurt so many times.
Yeah.
They don't want to be known because it's their way of putting it's their defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And if you can get through that by just having opportunity for them to be around and observe, and then they have a kind interaction with you or somebody, and then another one and another one, those walls can be torn down over time. That's the restoration that we're supposed to be for human beings on the face of the earth. That is what we're here for.
Yep. And that's what we read from Paul in Corinthians. It's like, be reconciled. We are the ambassador. We are the ones to bring that message of reconciliation. And that means we have to know other people. We have to be known by others. And so you're looking for pockets. Again, we're not talking about church growth because we're like, let's hope we get more people to show up at Radiant or more people to show up to Activate. No, I think the measure is how many of these smaller micro expressions and micro communities are being developed. Because it's not just, again, the park is just, it's a petri dish. We're going to try some things. We're going to learn. And over time, hopefully, that becomes a place where all of you can find, okay, I know how to do this in my life. Now we can start telling the stories. And we've done this before, too. I think of Paul Geisen with some things that he's done over at Leisure World. And it's like, let's talk about those stories. Let's talk about how he's reached out and built relationships with those people there, or the Knott's Berry Farm, or whatever it might be. This is what I think the church, when you look back at the New Testament church, this is what it looked like, right? Not the big 4,000 member church, with the slick worship leader and all that other stuff. It's the real life stuff where you're meeting every day, where you know people. So I'm just beating a dead horse
Christ called
here.
us to be fishers of men. The problem is we've been fishing in our own little 5-gallon buckets, right? We're waiting for the fish to jump into our 5-gallon bucket so we can make them disciples of Jesus Christ. Amen. But the park, at least for us, is a lake that we can fish in. There are fish there. We just don't know which ones we're going to catch yet, right? There's a literal lake in this park. So I want you guys to think of that. Figuratively, we're fishing in a lake. Who are the people? Every time we're there, it's going to be a different group of people. Not all of them are going to connect with us at first. Not all of them are going to connect with us ever. But some of them are going to connect with us, and they're going to meet Jesus.
Sometimes the fishermen's nets end up.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and something Jeremy said earlier.
Yeah.
Still give praise to God.
That's right.
Exactly.
We are not responsible for conversion. We are not looking to not, put a notch on our belt or anything else. That's not our responsibility. That's the Spirit's job. And so we just show up and say, all right, God, who do you want to connect with?
Can I tell you the most exciting thing growing up was I went to Temple and church, but the most exciting time was going to church when we went camping. That's when I felt called to go. And then,
Yeah.
but this is kind of why, because we went camping and they did have services outside on Sunday and you sat on logs wall to wall.
Sure.
And you got to meet all the people that you camped around as well as listening to God's Word.
Yeah.
And I loved your all of it.
Well, and just in case people didn't hear that, Suzanne was talking about when she was growing up that she liked when they went on like church campouts, and and it's like, yeah, those are the experiences. It's like, it's stuff that you already do. We're not asking you to kind of do something that you're not already doing. It's incorporating and building that community within the things that you're already doing in life, the things that you enjoy. So.
We do camping every year at our church until COVID hit. Pastor Jeremy.
That's right. Get on the ball.
Again, blame for COVID.
That's right. All right.
Get it going again.
Anything else you want to say? Nothing? Good. Okay.
Joel, I love you.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. I love you too.
I'd be lost
Weirdo.
without you.
Okay, now it got awkward. All right. Jeremy, why don't you pray us out?
Heavenly Father, we are honored at the way that you've uniquely made each one of us. Oftentimes I'm surprised, God, at the people who I'm able to connect with, because I don't think all that much of myself. I'm just a human being going through life, trying to live my life for you, just as these people in the room are doing that. And yet, God, I pray, I want to exhort them this morning that you have made each and every one of them as connectors, as a point, as a tangible way, an on-ramp to meet you, who they truly need to meet. So, God, I pray in humility this morning for each of us. I pray that we would each step into a deeper understanding of what you're trying to do, a humility, a patience, as we may not see things happen as quickly as we would like to. I know that's not probably anybody else's experience with you, but it's definitely mine. God, I pray that as we step into this next chapter of our churches collaborating and working together, God, that we would see your mighty hand move in awesome ways that would reconnect us and reinvigorate us for what you're doing on the face of the earth, what you're doing in human hearts and in human minds, and the healing that you want to bring. So God, I pray that as we go, you will heal us, that you will grow us, that you will develop these skills that you put in us. We will find out and understand new things about ourselves as we place our hand in yours and we do what you've asked us to do, which is to open our lives to people and introduce them to you. I pray a blessing on each of these families, each of these individuals, health and new wisdom in this coming year and fresh ideas as we go on this journey with you. We ask all these things in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.